Alright, welcome back to our podcast. I'm the gentleman, accompanied by the disturbed Southern Belle.
Hello.
And in this episode, we will be continuing our new series about the most disturbing human experiments in history.
Mm-hmm.
So, for this episode, we'll be talking about the Tuskegee Syphilis Study, which took place right here at home in Alabama.
Yeah, that's one of part of history I really wish hadn't taken place, but sadly, another one that did.
It's rather disgusting.
It is, and it's very disturbing, period. But it is what it is, because,
yeah,
it happened, whether you like it or not.
And ended up in a lot of fatalities.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So, actually getting into it, the Tuskegee study of untreated syphilis in the black male, better known as the Tuskegee experiment, was a horrific experiment that took place between 1932 and 1972 by the U.S. Public Health Service and Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Which makes it even sadder because these are people who are supposed to be helping people.
Yeah.
And they're harming people.
Yeah. It's, once again, the government.
Yeah.
The people who are supposed to protect the citizens.
Exactly. It's sad, but it happens more than we like. And it does. It happens too much.
So, the purpose of this study was simple. A group of approximately 600 African American men with syphilis were monitored and watched with little to no treatment. The researchers wanted to see what would happen to a human being if the disease ran rampant throughout the body. Sadly, the men involved were not actually informed about the exact nature of the experiment, and more than 100 of them died as a result of the hellish experiment.
I can imagine.
Yeah. So the study was started by the Public Health Service in 1932 in collaboration with the Tuskegee University, which was then known as the Tuskegee Institute. And to start the study, investigators were sent out to enroll men in the experiment. The investigators targeted African American men who were sharecroppers from the Macon County, Alabama.
So basically, poor black farmers at that time would basically essentially poor people. Yes. Yeah.
Also pretty common targets.
Oh, yes, definitely.
For these kinds of things.
It sadly is, because they don't have the means to get real support, so they look for things that, would help them, or they think something like this, some kind of study, they're going to treat them or help them in some way, and then they just screw them, basically.
Yeah, pretty much. So, of the group that was chosen, 399 had latent syphilis. Another 201 who were uninfected were selected as a control group. The men were promised an incentive for joining the survey, and that would be free medical care.
Right.
So while they did technically receive mental and medical care that they likely would not have received if not in the study, the men were also severely misled and were provided placebos as medication, as well as being told to use or try treatments that were known to be completely ineffective.
Ugh.
Yeah, not great.
Not good.
Also, they went through diagnostic procedures as treatment for what was referred to as bad blood.
Oh, yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah. So initially, the men were told the experiment was only to last 6 months, but it was extended to 40 years.
Well, of course. I mean, why wouldn't you?
So yeah, that happened.
Just keep it going as long as we can.
After the experiment lost funding to provide treatment, the study simply continued on with no treatment given and unaware of their syphilis diagnosis. So,
which makes it sickening, because they didn't even know they had it.
No. At least I don't imagine they did.
They didn't ever tell them.
This is made even worse by the fact that by 1947, penicillin, which is an effective treatment for syphilis if started early enough, was actually widely available and had become the standard for treatment. However, the men were not provided this option. So this continued under numerous public health service advisors. Then, in 1972, a leak to the press caused it to be terminated.
Oh, that's so sad. I hate to hear that. Ugh.
On November 16th of the same year, 1972.
Right.
At the end of the experiment, 28 patients had died directly from syphilis, another 100 had died from syphilis-related complications,
Right.
and 40 of the patients' wives had been infected with the disease, and 19 children were born with with congenital syphilis.
Which is just even sadder because they
Yeah,
just let them pass it and didn't and knew what was going on and just said, "Oh well,
yeah,
we're
pretty
just gonna
much.
see what's gonna happen. We're just gonna let this play out because that's what we do."
So the study was originally a sort of complement to a similar study that was done in 1928 known as the Oslo Study of Untreated Syphilis.
Right.
The Oslo study reported on the pathologic manifestations of untreated syphilis in several hundred white males.
Mhm.
It was considered a retrospective study since researchers had pieced together information from the histories of patients who had already contracted the disease.
Right.
As stated earlier, it was initially only going to last 6 months, and they thought the thought process was that the research would not harm the individuals involved.
Well, maybe not if it had really only lasted 6 months,
Yeah.
and then they maybe have helped them. It maybe wouldn't have, but that's not what they did at all.
No, they just let it go
Mhm.
on for 40
Yeah, I
years
know. And then be
because
passed to other
yeah,
people and children even, babies and stuff.
which is
Ugh. It
disgusting.
is, it is.
Anyways, at the time of the study, race was thought to be an important factor in how the disease affected the body.
Mhm.
Doctors believed that it would have a worse impact on black people's cardiovascular systems,
Right.
as opposed to their central nervous systems, as usual. So they took 600 black sharecroppers, they made sure they were poor, and
Mhm.
promised them medical care and treatments. However, we know exactly what happened after that.
Exactly.
So they were told that not treating, or they were not told that not treating the disease could have a rather nasty impact on their bodies,
Right.
including blindness, deafness, mental illness, heart disease, bone deterioration, the collapse of the central nervous system, and in worst cases, death.
Right. So a lot of suffering,
A
basically.
lot of unnecessary
A
suffering.
lot.
So the researchers instead told the men that, as I said before, they were just being treated for bad blood,
Whatever that means. Right.
which was a term that could have been used to describe many different illnesses,
Right.
such as anemia, fatigue, and as is the case right now, syphilis.
So it could have been it could have been anemia even, and
Yeah,
they had no clue. They just said, well, you've got bad blood, and that meant it could have been 1,000 things really in people's minds, to be honest, back in the 20s and 30s.
yeah, pretty much. So, at the beginning of the experiment, major medical textbooks that were available at the time recommended that all syphilis be treated, as to not treat would lead to dire
Of
consequences,
course.
as I just explained.
Very bad stuff. I mean, we even talked about it with Al Capone. I mean, how he
Yeah,
deteriorated, and it's I know he wasn't a good guy, but it's still sad, what it does to a human body. It is. It's sad.
yeah. So, they were fully aware, the doctors were, and the people running the experiment
Right.
were fully aware that not treating these men would lead to a lot of health issues
Mhm.
and possibly death for them or loved ones.
Right.
So treatment, while not great at the time, there were some arsenic-based
Mhm.
compounds such as
Something like that. I know what you're talking about, yeah. It's
arsphenamine,
something
whatever.
like that, yeah. It was like a drug they gave them for it had, like, poison in it. It's basically putting poison in them to kill something. It's kinda like chemo or something, that's sorta
Yeah.
ish.
This was branded at that time as the 606 formula.
Mhm.
So for the first 6 to 8 months of the study, patients were given formula 606, mercurial ointments, and bismuth.
Mercury ointment. So,
Mercury ointments.
that sounds like that would just be making things even worse.
It does.
But,
Yeah.
okay.
All of these were only mildly effective and, as most people would know, highly toxic.
Yeah, they're giving them arsenic and mercury and God knows what else.
Yeah. So these men were also given placebos, as I said before, which, for those rare few who don't know, it's just
Like a
like
sugar
sugar
pill.
pills.
Right. It
It's pointless.
has no medicine in it
No.
whatsoever. It's just it'd be like taking a piece of candy or something. I mean, it'd have the
Yeah.
same effect.
It's basically just to make people think that it's medicine, but it's not.
And right.
It's
And
just
it does
nothing.
work on some people. There is and that's usually people who don't probably really have really what's going on. You know,
Yeah.
they just maybe think they do or something and they think these pills are going to help them, so they help them.
Yep. So they were also given ineffective procedures that were misrepresented as treatment.
Oh, of course, got to do that.
All throughout the study, the participants remained ignorant of the experiment's true purpose, which was to observe the natural course of untreated syphilis.
Yeah.
The scientists also prevented the men involved in the study from getting help from treatment programs that had become locally available.
Which makes it even worse.
Yep.
Because they had stuff set up, they were actually helping poor people and giving them penicillin, but they couldn't participate.
Yeah. Although that would kind of defeat the whole purpose of the
Oh,
study.
of course
So
it would, but
playing devil's
still,
advocate, it makes sense
it
from their point of
does,
view.
but
It's still
I don't think I
disgusting
could ever do
behavior.
anything like this. I just don't think I could even be involved if I knew what was going on. I couldn't even be involved in this. I'm sorry. But that's
Not unless it had some major benefits.
yeah, this I don't really see how it does because they
No.
already kind of knew what was going to happen.
Yeah, pretty much.
So,
There's a bunch of people gonna die.
but pretty much they just wanted to watch it happen.
Yeah.
Seems like, which whatever.
It's stupid, but
It is what it is,
yeah.
right? It's just
So, the reasoning behind the study was that the knowledge that was gained would benefit humankind, though it was later determined, as one can imagine, that the doctors involved had harmed their patients by withholding effective treatment once it had been discovered.
right.
The study later became characterized as the longest non therapeutic experiment on human beings in medical
I
history.
guess so. 40 years.
40 years.
Well, I mean, even not. And then the ones who survived after would still be suffering. So, I mean, technically, it even went on longer than that
yeah.
because they're still suffering.
Yeah, they were. So, to make sure the men, and this is actually very just scummy behavior,
Mm-hmm.
to make sure that the men would actually show up for their quote unquote treatments, which were dangerous and painful spinal taps, doctors would send the men letters titled Last Chance for Special Free Treatment. And the first published clinical data from the study came in 1934, and its first major report came in 1936.
Okay.
So this was before the much more effective and safer treatment of penicillin had been discovered.
Right.
And but the study wasn't done in secret either, as there were reports and data sets being published in the medical community for pretty much the entirety of its duration.
Right. But the layman wouldn't really know what was going on.
Yeah.
I mean, it was more like doctors could see it, but we wouldn't know.
The average people
Right.
wouldn't have
They
any
weren't
idea.
like putting it out in like newspapers or something.
So, as I said before, or not there, sorry. During the time of the study, 256 of the infected men had tried to register for the draft that took place during World War II.
Right.
However, the military induction centers ordered them to obtain treatment for syphilis before they could be taken into service.
Right.
However, the men were prevented from receiving treatment by the researchers. So,
exactly.
yeah. In 1947, penicillin had become the new standard treatment for the disease in the U.S. The government even sponsored several public health programs, which formed rapid treatment centers
Right.
in the hopes of eradicating the disease.
I think they even set up little tents in places and stuff, sort of like little medical facilities and stuff, and gave out, medicine and stuff.
But when these programs came to Macon County, the men were prevented from participating because, yes, some were able to get arsenical or penicillin treatments elsewhere. However, most didn't.
Right.
And they were just left to suffer.
Exactly. Most probably couldn't afford it to get it somewhere else. I mean, to be honest, because they weren't,
Probably.
They were all struggling, probably. I'm sure they were. There's no way they wouldn't have been around the time of the Great Depression even, so it wouldn't have been a good time.
At the end of the study, only 74 of the test subjects were remaining alive.
Right.
So everyone else was dead.
Right. Now, some may have died of other reasons, but the majority of them was probably syphilis-related
Yeah.
complications at the very least. Stuff that, wouldn't have happened possibly, weakened them.
Yeah, most likely.
So sad.
So there were several people involved in the study who had repeatedly voiced criticism of the experiment.
Well, good.
Yeah. These concerns were mainly based on the grounds that the study provided poor scientific practice, which, yeah,
I'd say so.
that's accurate.
I'd say so.
This eventually led to a whistleblower by the name of Peter Buxton to
Mhm.
reach out to the press in the early
Good
1970s.
for him.
The story first made headlines in the Washington Star on July 25th of 1972.
Uh-huh.
In a report that was written by Gene Heller of the Associated Press,
Right.
it later became the first page news in the New York Times later the same day.
So it blew up quick, and it
Oh,
should
yeah.
have, because it's just horrible.
It was. So, as a result of the public dismay and outcry that surrounded the study, the CDC and PHS appointed an ad hoc advisory panel to review the study.
Okay.
The panel found that the men had agreed to certain terms in the study, such as the examinations and the treatment.
Right.
However, they were not informed of the true purpose. They also found that the study was medically unjustified and ordered its termination.
Well, yeah, because they already knew what would happen, basically.
Yeah. So, sometime in 1974, as part of a class action lawsuit that was filed by the NAACP,
NAACP, yeah.
NAACP, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
on behalf of the participants and their descendants, and this is amazing, the U.S. government paid the plaintiffs $10 million.
Which
Oh,
is so much money. I mean, it's a good bit of money back then, but still, think about this.
today, actually, it is a lot of money. It would be approximately $63 million today.
Yeah, but that's divided by everybody, too. So
True.
it's not as much. It's better than nothing, sure, but it's so sickening, that they do this and they're like, here's some money. Just go live your life. All these people you lost or whatever, what you gonna do?
It's stupid,
But
but
I know what you're saying, yes.
as part of the settlement, there was also an agreement to provide free medical care for all surviving participants and their family members who had been infected as a consequence of the study.
Well, that's a good
That's
thing.
good.
Yes, at least they got something positive at the very least. Very little in the big scheme, but yes, at least something came out of it to help make them more whole, I guess.
So, Congress also created a commission that was empowered to write regulations to deter such abuses from occurring in any future studies.
Good.
This has led to studies to now require informed consent, which means that a person must be given sufficient information about all the aspects of a study.
Yes.
It also must provide communication of diagnosis and accurate reporting of test results to participants.
Well, that's only fair.
Yeah,
I mean, people should be treated like human beings. I mean, they're treating people worse than animals almost.
pretty much.
I mean, ugh.
This also requires that institutional review boards be established in scientific research groups and hospitals to review study protocols. They must also protect patient interests and ensure that participants are fully informed.
Right.
Later, in 1994, a multidisciplinary symposium was held about the U.S. Public Health Service syphilis study at Tuskegee, which was called Doing Bad in the Name of Good, the Tuskegee Syphilis Study and its Legacy at the University of Virginia.
Right.
This led to the formation of the Tuskegee Syphilis Study Legacy Committee. It released its final report in May of 1996, which included two related goals. They wanted President Bill Clinton to publicly apologize to the survivors, as well as their community, for past government wrongdoings related to the study. It also wanted the committee to work alongside relevant federal agencies to develop a strategy to redress the damages. A year later, on May 16th of 1997, Bill Clinton formally apologized and held a ceremony at the White House for the surviving study members.
Right.
In his speech, he said, "What was done cannot be undone, but we can end the silence we can stop turning our heads away. We can look at you in the eye and finally say, on behalf of the American people, what the United States government did was shameful.
It is.
And I am sorry for our African American citizens. I am sorry that your federal government orchestrated a study so clearly racist.
Hmm?
5 of the 8 surviving members attended the ceremony. The federal government then went on to contribute to the establishment of the National Center for Bioethics in Research and Healthcare at Tuskegee.
Now, I'll say this. I have heard some people say certain things are racist that may not be technically racist, but this really kind of was because they purposely targeted black men that they knew were poor, probably had very little education because this was not long after slavery and stuff. I mean, it's true. And they knew that these men wouldn't really know, what I'm saying, things, and they purposely used them like they were just nothing, like these people mattered not at all, just because they weren't rich or, high in what they considered high society. It's
Yeah.
sickening.
They also targeted them because they thought that black people specifically would be affected differently.
Right. Just because that's how they used to think that like we were so different. And I'm not saying that there's not any differences in us at all. And, because there's certain diseases that do target different races more prevalently than others. But that doesn't mean that you know what I mean? We're all the same. I just, it's so stupid how ignorant people were and still
Now,
are in some cases. But
to be fair, again, playing devil's advocate here, it might not have been like they might not have chosen that or thought that because they were just bad people. They
right.
thought that all that black people were lesser humans. It may have just because they were ill-informed and they didn't
Well, let's
really
hope that's what it
know.
was. Let's really do, because if that's
Yeah.
not the case, it's sickening, because people should all be treated like people. I don't
yeah.
give a frick what your race is. You should be judged as a person, not the color of your skin, and that's just the truth, and it's sad that that's not the case.
I agree. But moving on. So, one of the main goals of the study was to determine the extent to which treatment for syphilis was necessary and at what point in the progression of the disease it could have been treated.
Mm-hmm.
Due to this, the study mainly observed individuals with late latent syphilis.
Right.
However, the study was not conducted in a scientifically viable way.
Nope.
Participants were treated with ineffective treatments such as mercury rubs and bismuth, among several others, which meant that the study did not follow completely untreated test subjects.
Exactly. So they weren't even seeing what would happen in completely untreated people because they were technically treating them.
Which, with what they were treating them, probably made them worse.
It might have. I mean, really, basically they were giving them poison. So, yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. But that ends that particularly disgusting event in Alabama history.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't even matter that it happened in Alabama. I wanted to cover it just because we are from Alabama, and it is one of the ones that's one of the most disgusting ones that really took place in the United States, to be honest. It is bad. I mean, it's probably not the worst, but
oh, absolutely not. I can think of a handful that's much worse.
There's some that are, definitely worse. The Nazi experiments, things like that, which will be something we're going to cover as well. But
it's still
sad.
Just absolutely atrocious.
It is. It's so sad and pointless. It was just like the little Albert experiment, because really nothing came of it. Really,
not
it was
really.
Just like, hey, let's torture this baby and see what happens. And
hey, let's make these men suffer 40 years.
Yeah.
Let's claim they're being untreated, but secretly let's make them worse by giving them both ineffective and harmful, quote-unquote, treatments.
And then allow them to give it to their wives and then have children that are affected and that could also pass it along, and just keep the chain going as long as we can,
much.
Because why wouldn't we? But anyway.
As I said, that ends this episode for the week. We hope you enjoyed it, because I certainly didn't.
No.
But it is an interesting one.
It's definitely interesting.
And definitely a good view.
And I think it's
past.
something, and I think it's good to talk about these just because it kind of like history repeats itself. So maybe if you shed light on some things, maybe it might shed open some minds up to where some of this stuff maybe won't happen as much. Let's hope.
While I do believe this is the kind of thing that deserves to be lost to history, and these people definitely shouldn't be remembered,
Right.
the people behind it rather, this is definitely the thing that or one thing that should be known so that way it doesn't get repeated.
Right. Because
Not that I think it would be nowadays.
I hope not. I hope to God
Just
that
because
nothing.
we know more about
Right.
syphilis
I'm
and
hoping
the
that
effects
nothing
on the
like
human
this
body.
takes place again in human history. I'm hoping that, most experiments and things, and things they do today, they actually do seem to try to help people and give them test drugs. And yes, they'll have a control group that they'll give placebos to because they have to see if the test drug is really working or not.
And that's just the stuff we know about.
Right. Now, I understand that, but people are told that they may be given a placebo. They don't know what they're getting. They say, we're going to give some medicines, some placebos. We're going to see, what happens if you, have any alleviation of symptoms, yada, yada. That's totally different than just giving somebody something and saying, hey, this is treatment, and it's really not.
Unfortunately, pointless studies are still being
Oh,
conducted,
yeah.
like one I think came out a while back, which not going to get too deep into that because that's more of a political thing. The effects of alcohol on fish.
Well, yeah, we need to know that. We definitely need to know because there's probably a lot of alcoholic fish down there. We need to know what's happening.
Yeah, really,
I
though.
mean, what's going on under the water?
Now, I will say this for people who are vaguely interested in why I bring that up. Look into U.S. aid. That's all I'm going to say about that. Like I said, that's too political for this channel, but
Yeah,
it is very hilarious that managed to get by.
I'm sure. I can imagine some others that we probably never will even hear about.
Oh,
Good God knows
absolutely
what
not.
they're wasting money on. But anyway, we hope you enjoyed that episode. Don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe. And don't forget to stay disturbed.